Arthur sits at his desk, the steady ticking of a clock filling the quiet room. He sips lukewarm tea, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. A sudden, sharp whisper slices through the silence, though the room remains empty. Arthur freezes, his hand hovering over an open book. He glances toward the dark corner, eyes narrowing in confusion. The voice returns, colder this time, echoing deep within his own skull. He rubs his temples, dismissing the sound as mere exhaustion from a long day. He closes his eyes, trying to focus on the rhythmic breathing of the house. The shadow in the corner seems to stretch, elongating across the hardwood floor. Arthur stands up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floorboards. He paces the small living room, his brow furrowed with growing concern. The voice speaks again, mocking his attempt to remain calm. He shakes his head violently, trying to dislodge the intrusive, diabolical thought. Outside, the wind howls, mirroring the turbulence rising within his mind. He checks the locks on the front door, seeking a sense of false security. The shadow whispers a dark secret from his past, one he thought long buried. Arthur gasps, clutching the cold metal of the door handle for support. His reflection in the hallway mirror appears distorted, eyes hollow and weary. He splashes cold water on his face, watching droplets slide down his pale skin. The voice laughs, a dry, raspy sound that vibrates against his eardrums. He retreats to his bedroom, seeking refuge under the heavy wool blankets. The room grows unnaturally cold, his breath visible in the dim moonlight. He tries to recite a poem to ground himself, but the words fail him. The shadow creeps over the edge of the bed, a dark, formless ink. Visions of jagged glass and forgotten faces flash behind his closed eyelids. He fights to keep his eyes open, but his willpower begins to crumble. The entity whispers of his failures, weaving them into a suffocating tapestry. Arthur grips the sheets, his knuckles turning white with the strain. He begs the darkness to leave, his voice cracking in the midnight air. The shadow ignores his plea, tightening its invisible grip around his thoughts. He dreams of falling into an endless, bottomless abyss of gray static. The voice becomes louder, drowning out his own internal monologue. He wakes up in a cold sweat, heart hammering against his ribs. The clock reads 3 in the morning, the darkest hour of the night. He sits upright, staring into the void of his own bedroom. The shadow is no longer in the corner. It is inside him. He feels the weight of the entity pressing down on his chest. Panic rises, a bitter bile in the back of his throat. He tries to recall a happy memory, but it turns gray and rotted. The entity feeds on his mounting terror, growing stronger with every heartbeat. Arthur stumbles to the window, looking out at the sleeping, indifferent street. He feels utterly isolated, a prisoner in his own skin. The voice suggests he is losing his grip on reality entirely. He clutches his head, his fingernails digging into his scalp. A vision of a shattered mirror appears in his mind's eye. He realizes the shadow is not a ghost, but a parasitic force. It is consuming his sanity, bit by agonizing bit. He looks at his hands, wondering if they still belong to him. The shadow whispers that he will never be alone again. Arthur sinks to the floor, defeated by the relentless, invasive presence. The room feels smaller, the walls closing in on his fragile mind. He tries to scream, but the voice silences him instantly. His thoughts are no longer his own, but a chaotic, swirling storm. The entity dictates his fears, turning his memories into weapons. He stares at the ceiling, tears tracking through the dust on his face. The boundary between his consciousness and the intruder dissolves completely. He is a stranger in his own body, watching from the periphery. The shadow pulses, a dark heart beating in rhythm with his own. He is desperate, trapped in a cycle of unending mental torment. The darkness claims the last of his light as the night continues. The man sits at his desk, trembling in the pale moonlight. He grips a pen, his knuckles white with tension. The shadow whispers, a jagged sound inside his skull. He realizes that running only makes the entity stronger. He opens a notebook, determined to document every dark word. The ink flows onto the paper, tracing chaotic, jagged lines. He studies the patterns, searching for a hidden meaning. A memory of a forgotten childhood mistake surfaces suddenly. The shadow hisses, sensing his focus on the past. He writes down the date of his deepest regret. The voice in his head grows louder, demanding silence. He ignores the pain, digging deeper into his own history. Another memory emerges, sharp and cold like a blade. He realizes the shadow is built from these suppressed moments. The entity flickers, its dark form wavering in the room. He breathes steadily, refusing to feed the shadow fear. The room feels colder as the entity loses its grip. He closes his eyes, inviting the painful memories forward. Visions of his past flash behind his closed eyelids. He acknowledges the guilt he has carried for years. The shadow screams, a sound of pure, desperate hunger. He stands up, facing the darkness in the corner. The entity lunges, a cloud of suffocating black smoke. He does not flinch, standing his ground firmly. He speaks aloud, naming the trauma he once hid. The shadow recoils, its edges beginning to fray. He walks toward the center of the dark mass. The air grows heavy with the weight of truth. He reaches out, touching the cold, intangible void. He accepts the shadow as a part of himself. The entity shudders, losing its distinct, diabolical shape. The sharp voice softens into a mere whisper. He pulls the shadow into his own embrace. The darkness merges with his own weary spirit. A blinding flash of insight fills his mind. The room falls into a sudden, profound silence. The malevolent presence is gone, replaced by stillness. He opens his eyes, seeing the room clearly now. The moonlight seems softer, less threatening than before. He drops the pen, his hands finally steady. He walks to the window and looks outside. The night air is crisp and filled with peace. He feels a weight lifted from his tired shoulders. The shadow is no longer a monster, but a memory. He understands that he is whole once again. He turns back to his desk with calm purpose. He closes the notebook, ending the cycle of torment. The silence of the night is now a comfort. He sits in the chair, breathing deeply and slowly. The darkness of the room feels like a sanctuary. He realizes his strength came from facing his demons. The integration of his past is finally complete. He leans back, closing his eyes for rest. Dreams will no longer be nightmares tonight. He is the master of his own mind again. The shadow is just a part of his story. He drifts into a deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep. The room remains quiet in the soft moonlight. He is forever changed, stronger than ever before. The long night ends in absolute, gentle silence.